Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney save. Today we're going to be working on a Lion King residential. This is the final Lion King residential for the Disney save for now, and it is none other than Rafiki's treehouse. This is a really fun build because it's kind of simple and a little bit quick, but I am excited for the opportunity to create more of a traditional treehouse. I have done variations of treehouses for the Disney save in various forms. Way back in Willow Creek for Mama Odie, I did her boathouse in the tree, which for all intents and purposes is very similar to this, but it's not like a actual traditional treehouse. It had to be more of like a weirdly shaped tiny home. And then I've also done more recently a house that included a treehouse when I did the Luca home and put the treehouse item from Growing Together in the backyard in Julia's home. I've also done the Lost Boys Lookout in Sulani, and that one is not a treehouse because most of the living quarters are underground, but I think a lot of people sort of regard it as a treehouse. So this is actually the first opportunity I've had to make just a plain traditional treehouse. And I guess I mean that in the sense that this is kind of a common build in the Sims community, kind of sizing up some logs and some trees and making a floating sort of house that looks like it is a part of a tree and kind of fitting it into the terrain in a tree-esque sort of shape. If I'm being really specific to the movie, Rafiki lives in a baobab tree, which is a very thick tree. Like, it's known for the super thick tree trunk. And so that's why I went for this very, like, just large platform that we have going on the bottom here. Not your traditional, more skinny sort of tree. This one is very thick and it's intentionally done as so. It is a more traditional, like, African-looking tree, something that you would very traditionally think of from Lion King. And also, if you've ever toured in the safari in Animal Kingdom, they have some trees that are sort of like replicas of this. And I believe the Tree of Life is also based off of one of these trees, but I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that one. That actually made this really easy because I had such a big trunk to go off of. It made a really flat base at the top, and that meant I could put pretty much the majority of the home in the one single level at the tippy top and hide everything under some of the cascading leaves and this big tree piece that actually is a debug item that comes from Jungle Adventure. It's just the top part of the tree that's floating really tall in the air, and I'm sure it was used in that world to kind of like piece together some of the jungle scenery. But for this, it works really well because I just needed something that was green and heavy to sort of place on top of my little tree structure here. Now, today's video is going to be a little bit different. I have never done this before, and you guys definitely need to let me know what you think of this in concept down below because I'm kind of toying with the idea. But I'm actually going to be doing Rafiki's Create-A-Sim right at the end of this video. This is basically like a two-part video. The first bit is the speed build, and then about halfway through, we're going to transition over to the Create-A-Sim. The reason for that is both videos just ended up being very short, and I didn't feel like it was worth it to split it off into two videos. We'll just keep them together and see how you guys feel about that. And also because the Create-A-Sim is just a single sim, and I never really like doing Create-A-Sim videos when I'm only making one sim. They're super short, there's not a ton to talk about, and I don't really have enough time in those videos to say everything that I want to say about any of the characters. So maybe when I do solo sims, especially if they're getting a residential, I can combine them at the end of the residential video, depending on how long that residential is. But typically speaking, if you're going to be doing a single sim, they tend to live in a more simple home, and that's definitely the case for Rafiki. I think when I think about his character, I definitely think that you could take the idea of him being a spellcaster and giving him magic, and that's definitely like a direction that you could possibly go, but I didn't necessarily feel like he needed to be like full-blown spellcaster, and he's not seen really using magic in the movie in that regard either. I think it would be more appropriate to have him be into things that are a little bit more on the mystical, spiritual side, and just activities and hobbies that lean in the magical direction but are not full-blown magic powers. So I really think he would be into things like meditation, herbology. Maybe I will give him some medium points as well. And then I could also, just for like an in-game translation, one of the newer things that we have now is tarot card reading. It's not exactly a skill, but you can put like tarot cards in the room and have characters able to use them and read them. I think he might be into things like that. The other thing that was really important important in terms of like hobbies for me when I thought of Rafiki. The only scene that you get of his home is when he is painting some of his visions on the walls of his like treehouse cave area up top. So I thought he definitely needed some areas to paint. In particular, I really wanted to make sure I could fit the wall painting mural item in here so that he can literally paint on the walls. Other than that, this is a tree, and I think he's a very minimalistic type of character. He wouldn't have a lot of stuff. I could see him being a little bit of a collector in terms of just like picking up some knickknacks, and even when you are shown his home, there are some bottles kind of strung from the ceiling, maybe some lights, some drapery, very, very, very minimally so. And then also the jungle and the plants and sort of things around are really the decor. So I'm trying to kind of blend all of those ideas together, but additionally, I'm also leaning back into what I had been doing for some of the earlier Lion King videos, which was trying to stay away from a lot of the modern stuff. However, this is an open concept, one single story home that has to fit everything. So the full kitchen's got to go in here. It's got to have all of like the essentials for living. So it can't be fully lack of like the modern type of stuff. And in that way, it's not going to look like a supernatural looking treehouse. There's really no way to hide that kind of stuff when I have to do like a full kitchen in the bedroom space. He kind of has like a studio apartment up there is what I'm saying. And so it has to be furnished like that. At the end, and not included in the video today, I kind of forgot the bathroom. It's not that I totally forgot. It's just that I didn't think that it needed to necessarily be in the studio space. So I decided and opted to have it outside. And it's downstairs by the entrance to the tree trunk around the back. That's not included in the video today, but just know I did not forget. Now, what you did see me doing there is moving these vines that are a little bit distracting, but definitely needed to be here for the purposes of making it more like tree-like branches, vines kind of hanging down. It's very distracting in the earlier parts of the video because I just really didn't know exactly where I wanted to place them. I did do that trick that I did in the Pride Rock speed build, which is that I'm placing them on a different level of the grid. So they're not going to get in the way at all. Your Sims will basically just walk right through them and act like they're not there because the game thinks that I've placed them on the bottom floor of the build. And they're kind of like in the space and in the way right now, but I do eventually move them apart and tuck them against the walls a lot better so that you can see and use some of the items in the space a little bit better. It was basically just a little bit too busy, and I felt like the busyness might distract and hide from some of the modern looking stuff, but it really just didn't look good, so I ended up like spacing it out a little bit better. I tried to do some animal paintings and some animal like decals and little things on the walls that I felt like could be representative of things that Rafiki has already painted, but we don't have a ton of really great options for that. That's one of those things that I'll probably be looking out for in the future, more like on the wall actual mural paintings and more in the cave painting category if we ever get little decals and pieces that fit that category a little bit better. I also just thought that color made sense in here in terms of lighting and bottles and string things hanging from the ceiling. Like I mentioned, that is kind of shown, and I also found one reference from a Lion King video game that has you in his space for some reason or another that depicted something similar as well, so I kind of tied that into some of the drapery and things that are kind of coming down from the ceiling. Other than that, it was actually really hard to place everything in here. This is such a weird balance of stuff because it has to be super functional. It has to be a studio apartment, so we're already working with like a closed environment, but an open concept, but a weird shape. It's very big. I didn't really want to draw walls. I felt like it needed that sort of openness to it. And then I wanted it to be a little bit comfy, cozy, lots of greenery, lots of things coming down from the ceiling. So it needs to feel busy, but not too busy. Something I've started to think about recently a lot that I'm a little bit desperate for is some kind of a new bed. Like one that's more laying on the ground, or one that's basically just like a very thin mattress on the floor and not the traditional sort of beds that we have in game. Anything that would allow for multi-sleeping, co-sleeping, more like snuggly type of sleeping for my characters that really just don't need a traditional bed but almost need like a nest. And that's so specific to me, so I will probably never see something like that in The Sims, but your girl can dream. Speaking of Mama Odie's treehouse, since I brought it up at the beginning of the video, there is kind of a similar dynamic dynamic in terms of how I approached both of the builds. So I did kind of have that in the back of my head when I was doing this one because I wanted it to be different enough from her home. Her home has more knickknacks, more little trinkets and treats around. She is a more modern character from the 1920s or so I could put more clutter in her room, whereas there is more just plants in here. But I think because I wanted this overabundance of things coming down from the ceiling, it gave a very similar vibe. And they're both in a treehouse, in a very small space that needs to work for fully functional purposes. The little crystal rainbow things that I have hanging from the ceiling are a holiday decoration, and I just thought they really fit in here. I don't know what you would call them exactly. It could be bottles, crystals, lights, and then I also did the hanging bottles. I think those are from the Tiny Living stuff pack, potentially, that I don't get to utilize very often, but they're the most closely looking, like, traditional string bottles with little lights in them hanging from the ceiling that we have necessarily right now. I tucked a puzzle in here. There is some tarot cards around. The mural made its way in, and I think a painting easel as well, so there's definitely plenty of things to do here. I also did put a hot tub downstairs with the outdoor bathroom area because I really felt like Rafiki at least needed some relaxation, some areas to kind of unwind, and I've basically put some kind of major water item on every other Lion King lot so far. The animals love it. The characters are going to love it. It's going to be like built into their characters as far as interests, so I felt like he needed one as well, even though it's not exactly depicted in the movie. Any minute now, we're going to be switching into the Create-A-Sim, and there is a little bit of exposition that I want to go over in terms of some of the decisions that I decided to make with Rafiki's character. You probably noticed from the thumbnail of the video that I decided to make Rafiki a female, and I have never, again, done this for the Disney Save. I usually stick exactly to what I am shown. I always go with exactly whatever the character's design is. I don't like to stray from it too much, and I think I'm a little bit nervous about this decision because I know some people are not going to like it, but I also think it opens the door for people to recommend certain ideas to me, like, well, we could just change this. And I'm just going to say I'm a really, really big stickler from just sticking to the source material and doing exactly what they have. But I think that Rafiki really had to be an exception, and I'm going to explain why. So if you saw my other Lion King Create-A-Sim videos, you'll know that I was extremely influenced by Broadway in the depiction of creating all of my characters. And I think from the very beginning, I've been hesitant and nervous to do Rafiki for obvious reasons in some circumstances. I did a lot of research in terms of how Disney approached the topic of this as well, because there could be some negative connotations with translating characters into animal forms. I'm gonna actually read you guys what I wrote on my Patreon because I think that this was something I thought about for a really long time, and I explained really how I felt about this the best there. I've been trying to think about the best way to go about Rafiki's design in the Disney Save for a while. This is a complicated one for a few reasons, but most importantly, I do not wish to be harmful in my depiction of this character and to add to or depict any potential racial overtones that exist, specifically because the referenced animal is a mandrill for this character. I've been reading a lot about the costuming, performers, and design choices that went into the stage production to see how the show creators felt about this, and I really feel like it's important to try to honor this character and the people who have depicted Rafiki specifically. If you have ever had the chance to see Lion King on Broadway, then you know Rafiki absolutely steals the show. Rafiki is always played by a woman in the stage production. Specifically, Cede Lee Loca was the first actress to play Rafiki. She was the only performer from the original cast to be nominated for a Tony, and she also wrote and composed an original piece for the show called Rafiki Sings. I don't think there is a better choice than to actually make her and design the character based around her and Broadway's design of this character and less around an actual mandrill. In the stage production, they give the character more of an androgynous look with lots of layers and more boxy clothing that flows away from the body, and this look is a little harder to achieve in The Sims because masculine and feminine frames are also tied to the facial structures, so no matter which I chose, it would have made the body or the face look off, but I chose to stick to feminine to match a closer resemblance to Layloka specifically. And then I did a mix of clothing preferences and a few options in terms of what she's actually wearing. One that is clearly inspired by Broadway, and 3 that are a little bit more blue and a little more body hugging in an effort to resemble the animated version. So when I approached the other Lion King characters, because they're based on lions, it was easy to reference the actual animal character that they are and kind of pull in some of the features of that animal into the sim. But this is not a simple translation and I think the more respectful way to approach it was to, instead of like focusing on trying to pull features from a mandrill, I wanted to make it look like Liloka. So she is the complete inspiration for this. I basically just looked up a bunch of photos of her and made her as the base sim first, and then tried to match the makeup as perfect as possible. I was able to use the hue sliders to get something that really truly resembles really close to what they have done for her in the Broadway version of The Lion King. Pretty much just went off of it from there. The costuming, again, being very heavily referenced, that I think doesn't necessarily look very close to the movie at all. So then I was a little bit worried that people weren't going to like the lots of usage of red and browns and the very, very different look that Rafiki sort of gets in the Broadway production. So I did give some options of like some tighter clothing with the blue as secondary choices, but she ends up being more of the inspiration, kind of like a celebrity lookalike recreation and less of an actual Rafiki recreation. And I think that that is just the thing that makes the most sense to do here, and the way that I can bring the character to life in a respectful way and do it in a way that honors somebody that was so important to the production of Broadway's The Lion King as well. I hope that makes sense. I hope that not too many of you are upset with my decision, because I know it is so far off from what I normally would do in any other circumstance, but I think that being respectful and not playing into any harmful stereotypes as well is really important in this particular character's design. I suppose if you really, really didn't like it, you could just change them over to a masculine frame and sort of switch some of the clothing around, or keep it. It just depends on how you sort of like the clothes to hit. Something that I'm not really too keen about in The Sims 4 is that you can use both masculine and feminine clothes for any body frame that you choose, but a lot of them don't fit really well to the form of the body that they've used. It just doesn't sit right, and the shadows don't always sit right. So you might have to change some clothes around, or you might not. For these same reasons, Rafiki is not an elder, because she is supposed to resemble Liloka more than she is supposed to resemble Rafiki from the movie. So if I had made her an elder, she starts to look not exactly close to Liloka when she was depicting the character on Broadway. Very, very much less a Rafiki, more a celebrity recreation, but I hope it makes sense why I made that decision. I hope you guys like it anyway. And that is gonna be it for today's video. Let me know what you thought of Rafiki's treehouse. Definitely let me know what you thought of the little combo of doing the creative sim at the end there. You could see how short it was, so it really kind of just needed to be thrown in, but let me know what your thoughts are on that down below as well. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below, or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.